This podcast is a proud member of the Unidentified Network.
So now, ladies and gentlemen, live and in colour, it's Mr. Wayne Lovejuice.
The other day I produced a Louis, had a chat with an interesting chappie who said that the YouTube algorithms really aren't that happy. If a channel only broadcasts once a week, so we decided we could Xtra. Whenever we've got a piece of news in our new book on the track Xtra.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name's John Downs. This is Peanut, and I'm the director of the Centre for Fortean Zoology, and he believes that he is the alpha male of the Centre for Fortean Zoology and in charge of all the other cats and the dog and the other creatures who come and go. What are we going to talk about this week? Well, first of all, I want to apologise for the noise that you hear. It's not my microphone malfunctioning once again. It's actually Peanut, who has the loudest purr, don't you, young man, of any cat I've ever known. He also, although it doesn't really show, he has the most magnificent eyebrows. I'm really quite impressed with that. And I think they're the pussycat version of my long beard. A sort of because he can. Now, the other day I was looking through those jolly nice people on Amazon Kindle Direct to see what cryptozoological books I could read in bed that night and that I could review for Animals and Men. And I picked upon a book by a guy called Lee Brickley, and it's called The British Bigfoot. Now, I cannot remember who it was who warned me against him, but I have been told all sorts of things about Lee Brickley, and I was told that his book was not going to be, how do I put it, a valuable asset to the British BHN library. So I read it, quite prepared to do a hatchet job on it, and found that whoever it was who told me this was completely and utterly mistaken, because it's a bloody good book, and I'm very impressed by it. If I have any criticism, it's that I hate the term British Bigfoot, because if Bigfoot exists, it is at least part of the reports of it are of a flesh and blood creature, a carbon-based life form just like me or Peanut, which are reported from various parts, but mostly the Pacific or Northwest of the United States, although there are other reports from other parts of the country and from Canada. Although there are some paranormal, and I hate the words paranormal and supernatural, because I think these things are perfectly normal and perfectly natural. They are just defined by laws of science that we don't understand yet. And I believe that these things are part of our environment. They are just in a different reality, a different dimension, if you will, although I think it is quite a leap of faith to equate the recent scientific claims that there are however many new dimensions there are with the idea that this is where these creatures come from. I think that these creatures come from another reality, which may or may not be part of our own world, but may or may not be part of something from a different dimension. I don't know if that makes sense, but it makes sort of sense to me. I think that they are part of a completely different reality. Fairyland, if you will, the place that people have been transported to over the years for all sorts of reasons, had all sorts of adventures, and then come back to our reality to tell the tale. Either these things are completely made up, or they exist and they come from somewhere else. I believe the latter. Now, the thing that is getting more and more interesting are the claims, and these are becoming more substantiated, that these things, as Ivan T. Sanderson would no doubt have called them, can actually leave physical effects in this plane of existence. And those physical effects may, it turns out, even include being able to leave DNA traces. There is also some sort of a link between these things, and I'm getting tired of doing the inverted commas signal, so I probably won't do it anymore, but these things that have been reported so widely, and people whose brains are wired differently. My brain is wired differently. All sorts of people would probably say I'm barking mad, and others would probably say that I have some sort of developmental disorder. But I think it's important that so many of the people who report seeing these Bigfoot, wodewoses, whatever you want to call them, have some degree of autism or something allied to it. I think that somehow there is a link here and there. And I think it's important that the people used to think that babies who had developmental disorders were changelings, that they had been brought over from fairyland and had been changed and swapped for regular human children. There has been a known link between the people who experience the paranormal. I still hate that word, and I want to think of a better word, and those whose brains are wired differently for many, many centuries. And I think it is something that present-day researchers should pay more attention to. Now, I'm a scientist. I may be an unconventional scientist. I may have spent my life and continue to spend my life studying things that are not the domain of normal scientists, but I am a scientist. I use the scientific method, and I believe that if we can find out the rules of physics which govern the appearance of these peculiar things that I refuse to call paranormal, that we can and will learn a hell of a lot more about our own species and our own reality and the nature of reality than we know at the moment. And I think that Lee Brickley has done an extraordinarily good job on this. I am fascinated to read his various case studies, and indeed the book really is a series of case studies. He has done his best to draw parallel or point out parallels between some of them, but he has not gone into the sort of hocus pocus that so many authors are tempted to do. And I'm very impressed by the way he's done it. He writes very engagingly and very entertainingly. But most importantly, the accounts that he gives shows that he is basically singing from the same hymn sheet as we are here at the CFZ, that these things exist, and the only way we're going to find out what they are is by gathering as much information as possible and then coming up with potential hypotheses based on this information and testing those hypotheses to destruction until we find out the exact nature of what we're dealing with. Like me, Lee appears to believe that these things are perfectly natural denizens of our world. Unlike me, he hasn't written that they appear to be only part-time denizens of our world, and he believes that in the wilder parts of Cannock Chase, which is a wild area in the North Midlands of England, a place I've been to on a number of occasions with my old friend Nick Redfern, there is somewhere where these things actually are living. I think this may well be true, but whether they are there all the time remains to be discovered. I think it's particularly interesting that one of the reports that he showcases was from a German national who was here in England to visit the German war cemetery at Cannock Chase, and he had an encounter with a BHM, a big hairy man-like creature. Some years ago, that's a long time ago now, it's 21 years ago, when we were in Staffordshire trying to catch a crocodile that had been reported in a lake just outside one of the suburbs of Stafford, a place called Cannock, and we tried to catch it. We saw it, but we didn't manage to catch it, and we did probably come up with an explanation of where it came from. But we stopped off on the way back at the German War Cemetery, and we did a very simple experiment using compasses and an EMF meter to try and see if there were any electromagnetic or geomagnetic fluctuations in the area, and we found absolutely nothing. Over the years, I have found that many of these occurrences happen in the places where there are geomagnetic or electromagnetic fluctuations. And it is something I'm urging everybody to do now, is to check the areas where they have ghost sightings, UFO sightings, Bigfoot sightings, or whatever, to see if they can find any evidence of this background electromagnetic fluctuation. Because one of the things that has been believed ever since John Keel wrote about it sometime in the late 60s is the idea of window areas, the idea of places where these things come from elsewhere and cross over into our dimension, into our reality, and cause electromagnetic fluctuations as they do it. But I'm wondering, and I'm serious about this, I'm wondering whether the exact opposite might be true. Whether there is something that is causing these places to become window areas, because I think it's a very good term, but that it is not the apparitions themselves that cause the electromagnetic fluctuation, but the other way round. Lee Brickley has assembled a fascinating catalogue of cases, and as far as I'm aware is still doing so. And I have every intention of contacting him and seeing if I can get him on the show. And I want to apologise, Lee, wholeheartedly and literally from the bottom of my heart. I want to apologise that for so long I thought you were going to be some sort of a charlatan whose researches were based purely upon things described in a novel that Nick Redfern wrote featuring me and Richard, because that book is a novel and should be seen as such. It never claims to be true, and too many people have taken it at face value and not looked on the back, where it is shown that it is, under the cataloguing system, it is a novel. This book of Lee's is completely true. It's an excellent book. I cannot recommend it enough. And if you're watching this, Lee, will you come on the show, because I want to talk to you about it. I'm going to be back on Saturday, and on Saturday I believe we're going to have Ian Squibbs, and we're going to be talking about the latest stuff happening at Loch Ness. Peanut and I will be there doing the live chat and the notifications and everything else. And so if you're there, are you going to be there, Mr. McCrimmon? If you're watching, I'm going to be seeing you. Bingo.